Hey guys, we're back.
Alive, upright, still in the game.
Yeah, talking ribeyes before we hit record.
Only thing better than that would be crawfish.
You make a mean ribeye. We had ribeyes last night, but we missed you on that, man.
Yeah, some people can't stay up as late as they used to.
Well, you've been traveling a little bit. In fact, you've only been back a few days.
Halfway around the world.
You've been in India. Let's talk about it, because when you picked me up from the hotel. I hadn't seen you. Last time we connected, you were on your way to India. I did a little traveling as well, and we talked about that in our Zoom calls. And you went to India with some new friends and some older friends of mine, but and then some folks I'd like to get to know. But I think Paul Goff was there, and Paul Young, and
Bruce Walkup, and Belinda, and another fellow that I had not met by the name of Gary Grant and his wife Debbie. That's the most beautiful people that I have ever seen, and the most amazing. I didn't really know exactly what it was going to be like, because I've seen all the grandiose. We had 200,000 people. No, that's the first trip.
Okay.
All the grandiose. We had 200,000 people,
right.
all that kind of stuff, and I'm just not remotely interested in that. And I knew that it wouldn't be that way.
Right.
And so this was a conference sponsored by Father's House Church in Chennai. And the pastor there is Yusidian Sylvester and his wife Lovey, and then they've got a great staff, highly technical. But what blew me away is I had no idea, and I've done classes with them over the last several years.
Right.
I had no idea how far down the road they were, that they had been studying my materials, and I'm sure Paul Young's, for years.
Right.
And they'd taken my book across all worlds. Every one of them that would come up to me and show me, and it was all underlined and starred and stuff. And so they turned that into a very serious healing course. And the amount of abuse that I heard about from the women and the men, well, all they've been through in their life, and now they're coming to encounter Jesus in the depths of their own soul. And so, I mean, for 30 years, whenever I would travel, I was not conscious of this, but I became conscious somewhere down the line of that. When I walk in a room, I'm looking for what I call the beamers.
Right.
And their faces shine.
Right.
It literally looks like there's a spotlight on top of my head that's hitting that lady there and that man there, and it's, and there's a connection in the spirit that forms in that's give and take, and they draw out of me. And the encouragement.
I call that you're talking when you're speaking. I call that the yes in the room.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you always got some. There's always some beamers in the room.
Yeah.
But when I stood up the first night to speak, there's 250 people there, mainly from Father's House Church, and pastors and leaders from across India and Sri Lanka and Malaysia and other places I don't know about. And when I turned around and looked up, I thought everybody's face in the entire room is beaming. I mean, it was unbelievable.
Yeah.
No, that's wrong. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And they have such a profound grasp of the gospel. It's got them. It's not intellectual. It's personal.
Yeah.
And it's healing.
Yeah.
And it's self-evident. So they're all shining faces, and it just draws out. So it was an event, a week long. Paul Young was there, and Paul Goff from England flew down with me from London. He was there. Bruce Walkup was there doing his whole inner healing teaching, which they had already been through a year ago with him.
Wow.
And then, like I said, Gary Grant and his wife Debbie. And Gary has been in and out of India, he was telling me, for 30 years, and everywhere he goes, there's always signs and wonders and miracles and stuff. And he said, then after I'd come back to the same place the next year, and there was no progress, there was no movement. It was just like signs and wonders, and that's it. And he kind of had his own come to Jesus crash, and realized this is really about family. That's what this is about. So he started sowing into that community with Yusidian and the leaderships. This is about family. This is about being face to face. This is so that was kind of the background there that I didn't know anything about. And but the way the hunger level the knowledge base. It made me embarrassed because of what, and I don't mean this in any way in a condemnation, but it's like we've just been playing a game here.
Okay.
I mean, these people are real. I mean,
Right.
this is. So the irony was they were asking us, what is the church in the future going to look like? And I'm like, I think we're looking at it.
Right.
You know, it's not, and we've had this conversation with them online several times, but it was quite. Their understanding of the gospel, their hunger for greater insight, and Bruce is always using John's Life, Light, and Love trilogy in his teaching, and I use that, you know, from John a lot too. But I said, this is it. What you have in this room is life, light, and love.
Beautiful.
And all you do is, thank you, Holy Spirit. We'll have more, please. And so I told him at one point, I'd just come. I'd been in Alaska with John Crowder and Rod Williams doing a religious detox cruise. And one day we got to see these magnificent glaciers. And so I said, listen, this is important. The glaciers move incredibly slowly, but they're exceedingly powerful.
Yeah.
And what the light, life, and love of the Father, Son, and Spirit are doing in you is moving slowly, and it is reshaping the landscape of the Indian soul and the Sri Lankan soul and the Malaysian soul, and I don't know where else.
Yeah.
And it's not like you got to go now begin this. This is already going on.
Yeah.
And it was like pouring jet fuel on an existing raging fire.
Yeah.
So I was totally overwhelmed. Paul Young and I, the first day, we both cried. I mean, just wept at where these folks are and their hunger and their genuine respect.
Yeah.
Because I said, I don't do the guru thing, and they weren't treating me with like a guru, but they showed it just amazing respect, and everybody's reading all the books and stuff. It's just, I was profoundly encouraged in the deep places of my soul, because I told them the story of Across All Worlds. I wrote that book in 2005, and it sat on my desk for 2 years, not published.
Right.
And it was because nobody was interested in it. And I thought, whatever. So I finally designed the cover and said, we need to at least get it out there because there are people that will be interested.
Right.
And lo and behold, I mean, it's growing a whole orchard of life down there.
That's beautiful.
And so that was in Chennai, and I just see it as flowing all over the place. And I think, man, that was, I didn't have expectations, but that was a constant moment-by-moment gift to me.
That's
in my
beautiful.
soul.
That's beautiful.
Every single day. And people would come up and share their stories, and they were just so thrilled and so alive and so grateful. And you could see the gospel that we've been hammering out has found a place where it's been received, and it's grown a community of love that radiates light and life. It's just amazing to watch it. It's like New Testament Christianity, just looking at it right here in the room.
I love the, I think we're seeing this in a lot of different places, but Bruce, who I've not met, but I heard him.
Well, you would not forget him if you met him.
I'm looking forward to the day. We have had a brief conversation, I think, on a phone call last time I was with you, but I heard him say that he's been preaching union for the last 20 years or so, probably longer than that. And he kind of gave this analogy. He said that if he were preaching to a room of 100 people, he said maybe there was 1 or 2 people in the room that was getting it. But in the last several years, he'll preach to a room full of 100 people, and everyone in the room, at some way, shape, or form, is getting it. There's he was recognizing a shift that has been taking place. It's something that certainly I'm feeling that I get to participate a little bit with some of the communities that have gathered around the podcast that we do. And hey guys, crossallworlds.com is where you can find us. Baxter, I love doing this with you.
It's my pleasure, brother. Fun.
It's life-giving. If you want to support us, that's where you can go. This is a listener-supported show. It's also where all of our resources are. Books, ways to get a hold of us, to connect. Crossallworlds.com is where we are located online, and we can't wait to see you there.
Right. That's exactly the case.
But I'm feeling that we're having the conversation. This is called the long arc or the long game of love. One of my favorite stories that I heard probably 15 years ago was about a true story about a farmer, West Coast farmer, California guy, who had a vineyard, and he was in his 70s. And this to me was, I heard the gospel in this. He was in his 70s, and he plowed under about a third of his farm grapes to plant a new type of grape that wouldn't produce a crop that would make wine that you could actually pull from for 30 years. And he was in his late 70s. So to me, when I heard that story, I said, that's the gospel, and that this man is believing for the generations. He's actually sowing seed and putting together a vision for a future he won't actually get to partake of in his own experience, but he's thinking generationally. And to me,
wisdom.
There's wisdom there, but that's the long arc or the long game of love. It's the thing that I feel like because so many people want to know, a lot of folks, and you and I have probably navigated these roads maybe a little bit earlier, but have had a distaste for the institutional models, the religious structures that have built, that we've grown up with, and so there's been this great. I use the word deconstruction, or just the great rethinking that has been happening, expedited, I think, by COVID, expedited by some of what's taken place culturally here in the last 4 or 5 years. But we're in this season where I do feel like when I'm speaking in a room, I don't have to start with Psalm 22 because half the room already knows about it.
Right. They
already, that was 10 years ago, for me, rocket science. It was like, oh my gosh, did you guys know Psalm 22? I'm in rooms that when I would share about that 10 years ago, nobody in the room had ever heard it. I'm in the room now, and I'm speaking to the fact that there's no shadow of turning. That's not what took place at the cross, and it's not new for people, and that's exciting for me to be.
There is definitely a greater openness that I see around the world, but I've never seen what I saw in Chennai.
That's beautiful.
That reminded, and I told them the story about John McLeod Campbell's book, Reflections and Reminiscences, when he's looking back on his life, and he was kicked out of the Church of Scotland for teaching universal atonement, and that assurance is the essence of salvation. And you think, what's the big? Well, Calvinism. But in his book on Reminiscences and Reflection, there's a letter that he wrote to his dad, who was a pastor. And John McLeod Campbell, this is 1800s, and he must have had an extraordinary experience of the Father's love inside the warped view of God the Father in Calvinism. But he got to his first parish, and he wasn't there very long, and he said he was writing a letter back to his dad, and he says, these are good people. They come to church, they care. But when they talk about God, their voices change. And he didn't use the word pose, but that's what he was saying, they start posing. And I was reflecting on this because I can see now what he's doing in his monumental book, The Nature of Atonement. He started tracking down, because to me, what he was saying was that their laughter is like the laughter of the man who did not get the punchline of the joke.
Okay.
I mean, technically it's laughter, but it's empty. Yeah. And so their Christian experience of God was like that.
Yeah.
And so he set about to try to figure out what was going on. So he had to undo Calvinism and undo limited atonement and change the very nature and understanding of atonement. That's been going on now for hundreds of years in the West. Yeah. And it's spread out all over the place. Some of these people, some of these men that I talk about, nobody knows about per se, but their ideas have been flowing around for a long time, and the seeds have germinated and they're growing in people in different places. And it's just quite staggering. Because I've been at this over 30 years, and the first 15 or 20 it was a dogfight. I remember when I was giving lectures on Jesus Undoing of Adam back in 98, and it was coming through Psalm 22 among other things, and there were people in the room that were thrilled and crying, but there were other people in the room that were like,
right, sure,
and now it's amazing to me to see the things that are changing in the United States.
Yeah.
But to go to a place like that, and you know, God bless our hearts. I mean, when you don't have a meaningful relationship with Jesus inside of your own crap, then your Christian experience is going to be like the laughter of the man that didn't get the punchline joke. And that's not a condemnation, because I know that well.
I've been that guy.
Yeah, you know, and still am in many ways. When we're all growing.
Sure.
But then to build these empires out of that for a distant deity, and create these programs and all this evangelistic technique and export that around the world, and it creates this sort of need to do the rah-rah grandiosity. So now we know we're doing something for God. And I'm like, man, I'm all for signs and wonders, but I'll tell you the greater wonder and sign, and that is the healing of a broken soul.
Yeah.
From that person or that group of people are going to flow all kinds of miracles. It's going to be normal, the early church. But I would rather have to see the soul being healed, and I think that's what we're watching. Yeah. We're watching the undiluted gospel, the original message of the apostles, it's been being recovered now for centuries, and it's being told, and it meets with resistance, but it's so beautiful it just takes people's breath away and begins to heal their soul. And when that happens, you don't go back to religion. You go forward with joy. And your face shines, you're a beamer, and you don't even know it.
I heard this guy once talk about, once you've had the real steak, you don't go back to eating cardboard.
And you certainly don't try to put Bible verses on it to prove that it's not, that it is a real steak.
That's right.
Good night.
What's so encouraging, though, it's got to be because they took Across All Worlds and they applied it in ways where you get to show up, 10 years later, and actually participate in the fruit, which is what you're describing.
Yes.
You show up and go, oh my goodness, the gospel has been permeating and developing and transforming. And when I walk into the room, there's a yes in the room, a collective yes, the beamers in the room. And so we get to, we don't have to start back here. We get to lean in.
Well, you're not in a fight.
Yeah.
You're not trying to prove something. You're not trying to survive.
One of the things that I heard you say, I went up to the men's conference, Memphis, here this last year, you and Crowder and
Jackson, Tennessee.
That's right, north of Memphis. Jackson, is that right? Mm-hmm. North of Memphis? Mm-hmm. I think that's where I flew in.
East of Memphis.
I remember, it was significant to me. You may not remember saying it, and this is that idea that, George MacDonald was sowing seed, speaking into 100 years ago, what we are getting to participate in now. You made a statement, and it stuck with me because in some ways, in some small ways, I've experienced it myself. You said for the last 30 years or so, you would have armor on when you would preach. You kind of used that analogy, like you had to armor up, and it wasn't necessarily a defensive thing, but it was you'd been in enough rooms where you knew you had to, but you made this statement, and it resonated with me because I thought, what a beautiful testament of a shift in even your life. You said, I'm in a room where I don't need armor. And it dawned on you, and for me, that resonated with me when you said it, because I thought, my goodness,
you don't realize how defensive your posture is.
Yeah, until you realize you don't need it.
All right.
And where you realize, I'm in a room with a yes. There is a shift that is taking place. Oh my goodness, let me acknowledge.
There's a great for years, I would take Athanasius on the Incarnation with me, and T.F.
Set it out, right?
T.F. Torrance's book on the mediation of Christ, and I would put it in the first pew, leaning there facing me, because I knew what was coming. Yeah. And now, like going there, I mean, they've studied Athanasius. They know him as well as I do, and they've read T.F. Torrance, and this is like a celebration of life. And that's like, what new insights do you have to share with us? And of course, Paul Young is perfect for that context, because he's just always sharing stories about what's happening with people. And the whole point is, as you come to know that you are held, forever held by Jesus and the Father and the Holy Spirit, you begin to relax a little bit in your inner world. The stormy seas are calming down, and you begin to notice. and then you're free to respond to what you see.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's it.
You don't do any more.
I love it.
And you have no idea where all it's going.
I had this 6 or 7 years ago. We were speaking at a church. I don't know if I've told this, and who knows, we'll say it again. You may have heard it, but I'm speaking at a church, doing my best to find the beamers in the room. And the pastor afterwards, my wife happened to be with me on that trip, and he prayed over us. And as he was praying over us, he said, "Hey, Jason, I have a picture of an island. You're an island." And I was like, "Thanks, buddy. That's real encouraging." no, Sherlock.
Yeah, really.
So,
Yeah.
but then he says, no. He says, "You're an island." He said, "You've been on this island for a long time, and you've been stewarding the resources on this island." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm listening." He's like, "You've learned everything you can. You've actually developed quite a beautiful ecosystem on this island." He said, But then as I was looking at the island, he said, it spread out, and he said, all of a sudden I realized you're a part of an archipelago. He said, I see a whole bunch of other islands. And he said, and I realized that there are folks on all of these other islands that have been navigating their own journeys. They felt alone, they felt isolated, but they've also been faithful. And he said, and then as I spread out a little further, he said, I began to see bridges. And he said, you get to play a role in some of these bridge making, which has been fun in these last years to see that. But he said, I see bridges. And he said, all of a sudden there's resources, and everybody's sharing the resources, and everybody's discovered some aspect. And what was fun when I heard it, of course, I was like, well, that's a beautiful word. Appreciate it, man. Thanks. Because right now it feels like I'm on an island. It feels like it's been that way for 20 years.
Not many resources.
And not a lot of resources. But I feel like even in the last year to 2 years, I was reminded of that prayer that he prayed over me, and that word that he spoke over us probably about 18 months ago. I was out for a walk, and I was talking to Father. He said, "Hey, you remember that archipelago word?" And I went, I think we're in the middle of seeing some of that. And the reason I brought it up is partly it's encouraging to me, in my own personal life, to be here with you and to be connected, to these names that we're talking about, all the connections that have happened through some of the podcasting that we've done. But also structurally, when we're talking about what does the church look like right now. And the reason I brought Zoom up and how I think some of that practically helped us, because so many people want to know, how do we connect? Who do we connect with? What does it look like to do life together? Because community is so important. It's
the Trinity.
It's 100%. And so I don't know what it looks like, but I am more and more encouraged by the fact that it can be varied. That what I loved about an archipelago structurally is that there wasn't some lead dog. There wasn't some elevated hierarchy to the thing.
And some grand vision that somebody was trying to impose on everything.
It was already, someone came along later and said, archipelagos are already connected under the ground. You just don't see it. So to me, it was more and more of a clarity, even on the season that we're in, the season that we're coming into. I know folks are looking for opportunities to connect, and we don't necessarily have that, but except for the encouragement that it is happening, that you're seeing it in India, that we're seeing it.
I saw the future in India.
That's beautiful.
It was just what it is, and it looked like a healthy, functioning family. It didn't mean everybody was whole and complete in their own experience, but they're not being left behind for some grand vision over there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. and this gospel undermines the hierarchical ways by which we want to, us humans, we like to.
Well, it's not the gospel, it's Jesus, and it's his relation with his Father and the Holy Spirit.
Come on.
That life is not hierarchical.
Yeah.
And there's mutual submission and mutual care. And they're not about to run off and leave each other behind.
That's beautiful.
They do everything together.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a family.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm 65 and I'm finally seeing that. I finally realized, this is the point. I think my wife would say, yeah, well, I've been praying for you for 44 years.
If it doesn't look like family, it isn't kingdom. That's it, man. I mean,
whatever it is, and whatever you got, whatever science you've got on it, it's not kingdom.
That's it. Yeah.
That's the passage Jesus talks about restoring the hearts of the Father to the children and stuff. And I used to think, what's that about? But that's exactly what it's about.
Yeah.
Love one another. You cannot hide that. And nothing on earth can manufacture it. The gospel alone, Jesus alone, being discovered in people, frees us to care about each other.
Come on. Yeah. That's
And we've just totally ignored that with our grand schemes.
well, that's, I mean, in the early days, you know, the ministry we have is a family story. And I think it was Bill Johnson who said, if it isn't family, it isn't kingdom. But that resonated so deeply with me that Jesus came to show us a father, what it looked like to live confident as a son. It wasn't some
Royal freedom.
It was the royal freedom, and then said again, the kingdom is at hand. This union, this revelation's at hand. Not only that, it's within you. And how about that? We get to live from that place.
That is the point.
Yeah. What do you got coming up? Travels?
I'm trying not to. I mean, Paul Young and I talked about that several years ago about kind of winding down on some of our travels. But are you kidding me? I don't want to miss this.
Yeah.
This is fun.
Yeah.
You know, you walk in a room and there's favor there.
Yeah.
There's joy there.
Yeah.
And celebration.
Baxter, I want to thank you, man. I'm grateful to you on behalf of, so many folks, the forerunning that you've done. And, you know, I know the story of you in your office, and we don't have enough time to go in depth, but you in your office having a conversation with God where you're like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done, and yet here you are. I think you've shared a little bit of that story at some point. Maybe we have you share it again. But I'm grateful to you. I'm grateful to all those that have been faithfully stewarding the island that God gave them. And
well, that's what I see in the tacos thing. I mean, you started something, you had no idea where it's going now. It's global.
It's pretty cool,
and it's quite beautiful. And I just think about, the Torrance brothers, and then before them, McDonald, and before him, John McLeod Campbell. These brothers are thrilled.
It's beautiful.
I feel their joy.
The cloud of witnesses, man.
Oh, man.
CrossAllWorlds.com is where you can find us. Perichoresis.org, FamilyStory.org. We appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time.
Across all worlds, he came for us. We